Right, welcome everyone. Today I want to talk about AI. It's been a bit of a hype word recently, and we really want to go over how to implement and adopt it securely in your business, how attackers are using this, how you can use it for defensive purposes as well. But before we answer any of those questions, I want to go over a brief history of artificial intelligence just to understand how we got to where we are today. So back in the 1950s, 1980s, we were confined to rule-based systems. It was used for therapists, for example, like the Elisa chatbot right there, and rule-based expert systems. And while this was very impressive at the time, it had no real adoption or integration into businesses, leading to funding drying up and what we call AI winters, where AI progress significantly slowed down. Then we moved away from rule-based systems and shifted to statistical learning, where AI started learning patterns from large amounts of data. And two big events that happened from the 1990s onwards was when machine learning systems beat the world champions in both chess and a much more complicated game, Go, shifting the public's perception and really building excitement around AI's possibilities. And today we're seeing some real mainstream adoption, mainstream integration, and AI is finally starting to live up to some of its promises. And this is all thanks to the transformer. So you might have heard of this paper. It was written in 2017, where they introduced the transformer architecture, allowing language models to take into consideration the context of each word in user language instead of processing it sequentially like older models do. So this is the foundational model behind every chatbot or major chatbot we see today, like ChatGPT, Grok, Gemini, and Copilot. And there's no slowing down. Every day we're seeing new developments. Big companies like Google, NVIDIA, Microsoft, they keep innovating. You can't go one day without monitoring the news and you're already outdated. And this being integrated into every single facet of business, even cybersecurity. So we have to ask ourselves, how do we navigate this new age of cybersecurity in the age of artificial intelligence? Firstly, we can look at some defensive use cases for AI. So first up is behavioral biometrics. It's being used quite effectively in learning how you tap, swipe, or otherwise use your phone. It can flag multi-factor authentication prompt when it detects any deviations from this behavior. And as we all know, it's very effective. AI is very effective in processing large amounts of data, extracting patterns from this. It's being used very effectively in stuff like phishing, anomaly, and fraud detection. So it's clear that it's no longer just isolated tooling. It's becoming a core foundation of defensive security. And although it's very impressive, there's a growing temptation to automate everything possible. This is usually done with good intentions to free up professionals' time to work on more complex and challenging problems. However, we've seen this story before where people rely on AI way too much, and it usually results in disaster. We've got two examples here where they tried to implement it in a security operations center, but needless to say, it led to disaster. So while AI is very, very efficient and effective at what it does, very impressive, we must still realize that it cannot yet do the job that a human does, not fully. And we should keep this in mind when we do want to automate certain aspects of our jobs. We all know that generative AI is also being used very effectively to a great extent by malicious actors. Stuff like spear phishing has been automated, so language is no longer a barrier. These attacks can be grammatically perfect, and they can even monitor your social media usage to make targeted attacks, making it more likely for you to interact with or engage with their attack. Another area of interest is unconstrained large language models. So that's when there are no guardrails or policies in place to guide LLMs, making it easier for attackers to develop malware or evade defenses that they might have encountered otherwise. Deepfakes is old news, but it's becoming viable for attackers to use this technology to do real-time deepfakes. You might think you're talking to an employee or your boss or a candidate they might be interviewing, where in reality they're being impersonated by somebody else. And then lastly, this generative AI technology is becoming really, really impressive and we see vulnerability hunting being implemented as well. So automated discovery or attack path mapping of web applications, and sometimes even automatic exploitation of vulnerabilities found in those applications. So it's a very, very scary technology when used in the wrong hands. However, it's not all doom and gloom. Everybody benefits, not just the malicious attackers, but the good guys as well. We've got an example here, Burp AI released by Portswigger. It's implemented in Burp Suite, a tooling that's commonly used by security consultants. So it's really impressive. It helps with, it assists your workflow. So as we've said before, it's developed with the purpose of helping you focus on more challenging vulnerabilities, perhaps. So it holds a lot of promise, but we haven't adopted or integrated it yet, and we need to ask ourselves what is holding us back from adopting this very powerful technology. And there are three main concerns. The first one is we need to ask ourselves, how much value does using AI truly offer? Currently, it's not always clear that we can achieve more than we already do, as we do with traditional tooling. Then the next one is cost. So currently, it's prohibitively expensive to use stuff like Burp AI. We can only run small-scale test cases. There was one instance where we were trying it out when it just got released. We burned through all of our free credits, and we didn't even get through a small application that we use internally for training. So it's really, really expensive, and we still haven't solved the problem of compute cost in AI today. Then lastly, there are a lot of security and privacy considerations when using tools like these. We can't ship sensitive client data to third parties, cloud-hosted LLMs on somebody else's premises. So if we're not adopting it yet or integrating it yet, why focus on AI in cybersecurity at all? It's clear that everyone is adopting AI, and we can see here there's sort of an exponential ramp-up of mentions of AI at Black Hat talks. So it's very prevalent in cybersecurity community as well. Everyone is starting to focus more and more and more on AI. So everyone's adopting it, whether you like it or not. So the real question we should be asking ourselves is, how do we do it securely in our business? And the approach that we found to work best is to stick to the fundamentals. Although AI is a new technology, there's a lot of uncertainty with implementing this. It's still rooted in fundamentals. So OWASP was very quick to offer us the top 10 vulnerabilities for LLMs. But if you look close enough, I think you can agree with me that we've seen all of this before. It almost looks the same as the OWASP top 10 for regular web applications. If we look at prompt injection, you can draw an analogy to SQL injection or cross-site scripting. Sensitive information disclosure, we've all heard about. Supply chain vulnerabilities, we see that in regular applications as well. Data and model poisoning, authorization issues, and improper output handling. We can draw an analogy to output encoding. So to drive this point home, I want to give you an example of a typical implementation that we find in businesses today. So when you interact with a chatbot, you might see something like this on the front end. So website and a chatbot which you can interact with to find out more information about the business or about services you might want to inquire about. And it might seem that we can do a penetration test of this functionality in isolation. But if you look deeper, if you look just deeper than the surface, it's integrated into almost every aspect of a business environment. So we can see here is we've got the LLM hosted either internally or externally on the cloud. It's being interacted with through web application interfaces like we see there or just saw. And this LLM can interact with content stores of the business. So that stores chat history, user information, maybe financial or health-related information. And then it can also interact with plugins, for example, internal or external to the business. And as with any other application, you also have a deployment pipeline. So one of the vulnerabilities that we see often in generative AI, and that gets thrown around a lot these days, is prompt injection. So we saw that this is similar to something like SQL injection or cross-site scripting, but one caveat with this vulnerability is that it is an inherent vulnerability in large language models. If you think back, we saw that transformers are the foundation of LLMs today. That transformer is actually inherently vulnerable to prompt injection. And that's because there's no way for the model to differentiate between system instructions and user input, meaning you can break out of that context of user input and specify system instructions. So the next vulnerability that we see very often is sensitive information disclosure. It's nothing new. In cases for generative AI, this can be sort of a knock-on effect from something like prompt injection, where an LLM perhaps accesses data it wasn't supposed to. Perhaps it's an authorization issue down the line where it's accessing another user's content. If you're not spinning up individual LLMs or content stores per user, it's perhaps not practically or financially feasible. This can very easily happen where you might inadvertently expose another user's financial or health information. Then we've got supply chain vulnerabilities as well. We're all familiar with this. If any component in the deployment pipeline is compromised, then it can affect the whole business environment. So in generative AI systems, this can look like using third-party components that are outdated, deprecated, or otherwise vulnerable. If you implement a third-party model, it might have malicious code in it. It might have a backdoor or trained on poisoned data leading to unintended actions down the line. So it's always important to verify the components that you use, the models that you use, as we do with regular applications. API token leakage is another really interesting vulnerability, really similar to sensitive information disclosure. If you think of a regular web application where a user might authenticate themselves with the JWT, this is very similar. So an API token is used to select a model or gain access to capabilities that the model can use to perform actions. The difference here is that if an attacker gains access to the API token, which might be exposed in requests and responses or application logs, they have unauthorized access to this LLM and have as much access as that LLM does in your business environment. So if it has read-write access to your content stores or it can interact with internal applications, the attacker has as much reach as this LLM does. So it's also a very important consideration when developing these systems. Then excessive agency, it might seem like a new and scary vulnerability where an LLM takes actions that it wasn't supposed to. It's been given too much privileges and it takes actions that you never intended it to. But as we've said, it's not really new. If you look at it closely, it's just an authorization bypass. Authorization is not being enforced on applications or plugins that the LLM is interacting with. It's not being enforced effectively. So what we need to do here is do a review of the LLM's roles. Is it acting with the same role as the user it's interacting with? Is it acting with a super admin role where it can perform all actions necessary for all users that it interacts with? So that's the questions we need to be asking ourselves when we implement this and when we protect against excessive agency. So when we develop generative AI environments like these, we should ask ourselves, how do we protect against these new threats? And what I hope you realize by now is we should be asking ourselves, are these really novel threats? So AI is a new technology. There's a lot of uncertainty, especially in the cybersecurity context. We want to make sure we secure ourselves properly against vulnerabilities or exploitation of vulnerabilities. And although there's a larger attack surface, there's more considerations, more moving parts when we deal with this technology, the fundamentals are still unchanged. And this is more important than ever. So what I want to leave you with is that the more things change, the more they stay the same. And we should stick to the fundamentals in the face of new technology like artificial intelligence, like any other new technology that we do face. And we can see here for attacks that have been supercharged by AI, like phishing or deepfakes, we still have those fundamental protections against them. So stuff like multi-factor authentication controls protecting against account compromise, which result from phishing or deepfakes. You've got communication policies as well, for example, giving the person you're talking to a phone call just to make sure that it's actually them you're talking to. And you've got awareness training for phishing as well. So although AI security might seem new and the vulnerabilities that come along with it are very scary, legacy security still has its place alongside AI security. The fundamentals are what matter, and the fundamentals are what we stick to when we develop systems like these. And that is how we should navigate this age of artificial intelligence in cybersecurity, and how we should go about implementing this in our businesses. Thank you very much.